Yeah, so I just wanted to have just an impromptu, just because we all been around here for a long time, trying to do different things, and we like the O.G.s. So Bill Cobbs, University of Michigan, U.S. Navy. You work for IBM?
No, I work for Xerox.
Xerox, that's right, Xerox. Did you know Charles Petros?
Yeah, I know Chuck.
Yeah, his wife and my sister were best friends.
I know Chuck well.
Usilla, yeah. And Reggie Barnett, long time, lifelong friend from Flint, Walker School through Central, Notre Dame, Duke, IBM, and I went to GMI, Michigan, went out to New Jersey, worked for AT&T, Bell Labs. So we saw and we experienced Michigan and Flint and Detroit at the heyday, and we saw the tremendous decline, and now we see these efforts at recapturing some esteem, some glory, some economic success. So I'm just curious, one of the things we're looking at is what do we need to do? What are the priorities? What are the main issues that we need to address? And Bill, I know you even ran for governor a few years ago, and you've been very eloquent talking about the issues and talking about on Facebook even now talking about the different issues that are. So I wanted to get your take first on where are we at. What's the problem?
When I look at our community today versus what our community looked like when the three of us were growing up, there's a fundamental difference today in that we all grew up in stable households. We had the benefit of a mother and a father. And all too often today when you encounter our young people as they're going about the process of starting their lives out, young women today don't understand the order that things come in. They allow themselves to be seduced into believing that living with somebody is the same as being married to them. So you find people who have children out of wedlock, which I don't agree with, and they don't recognize that when people can just walk away and disregard their responsibilities, some people do that, and then it becomes a kind of virus in your community. This person does it, and this person does it, and this person does it. So you remove stability. Once you remove stability, you make it easy for people to view themselves as an individual as being everything and not recognizing that they have a responsibility to our community. When we were growing up, if you as a kid were out in the street doing something you weren't supposed to do, and Ms. Brown from down the street saw you doing that, you knew that she was going to take you to task. And then after she took you to task, she was going to make sure your mother and father knew about it, and they were going to deal with you again. So there was a level of discipline that existed. It doesn't exist today. There's the average young parent today doesn't want anybody saying anything else to their child. And as a result of that, children don't have the same deference, the same respect for their elders as they had when we were growing up.
But I'm interested in the cause and effect of the whole thing too, in that our folks, maybe your folks, I know my folks and Reggie's folks came up here from the South, attracted by these jobs that existed here, and you say that the family situation was different then, but it was also the case that just going up and down the street, all of those families had one or two adults who were gainfully employed,
right,
making enough money to rent a house or buy a house and support their kids. And it seems like after the 70s or 80s, all of that changed where, the opportunity for gainful employment, at least easy gainful employment, you walk out of high school, walk across the street to Chevrolet and get a middle class job. That has changed.
Well, I think the thing that changed is that we believe that the situation is never going to change. That there were always going to be those jobs, and we weren't prepared for the impact of automation, for industrialization to change. We weren't prepared for commodity-based manufacturing to go away because labor rates would no longer sustain that. And the irony is that we now have a president telling folks that he can bring back commodity-based manufacturing. And it's not realistic because there's no way in the world that you can manufacture widgets and sell them at a price that allows you to make a profit.
Yeah.
And folks are counting on that rather than embracing the fact that we now must educate ourselves and educate our children to be prepared for the opportunities that really exist.
And that's to say nothing about the robots.
Right.
The robots
Right.
coming. So, Reggie, do you have the same kind of take on the situation? Looking to the past. I'm asking about the past, and I'm going to look to, okay, what about now? What do we need? But looking back at the past, do you have the same kind of view of what happened?
Well, looking back at the past, and I'll use my family as an example. Obviously, many of us were part of the Great Migration from the South to the North. And as a result of that, we all came up here with similar goals. We all wanted to do better than we were doing in the South. We all wanted to make a good living, and what we called a good living, and have a dependable job. But also, I think one of the things that we all sought to do was better ourselves than our parents. And so we all sought to keep elevating and growing. That seemed to go away when some of the manual labor jobs started to disappear. And we didn't adjust, and we found parents started to take care of the children as they got older, instead of children moving out, growing up, and helping the parent. So the order of things somehow got out of flux, and I think a lot of that had to do with education and our desires, and we also, as Bill said, we lost some of our base morals and foundations of what we were a part of, and I think that was part of it. But also, in some ways, we were snookered. We were thought to believe that things were going to continue. Nobody told us that General Motors and all the automotive guys are going to move to the suburbs.
Or Mexico. Or China.
Mexico or China. And so we were never properly prepared for that. And so we got behind the 8 ball. And we continue behind the 8 ball now as the infrastructure in the United States has started to decline. The infrastructure, like the school systems, those things are not what they used to be. When we and I were in school, people used to come to Flint from Asia to see our school system. And how we did things.
Community schools concept and all that stuff.
And all those things. So, bottom line is, I think somehow we got to figure out how to rapidly deploy some of those basics, the infrastructure basics, education, want the children to do better than their parents, how we're going to grow that, and how we're going to come together. I mean, we're in a time now But I think it's so divisive. Where the people in the black community want to be, somebody wants to be higher than the other person in the black community. Obviously, from what we're seeing on a national basis, there's now either you're Republican or you're Democrat, and all these things, house that's starting to become a house that's divided, and a house that divided can't defeat a house from the outside attacking it. So that's my basic view.
Well, I think it's hard to change the situation unless you have a view of, unless you have a vision and a strategy, right? What do you want to change? What are if we could change things right now, not to immediately get to the promised land, but to start moving in the right direction, what are some of those things that we need to do as a community and as an overall community, as a Southeast Michigan community or a Michigan community? What do we need to do to get things moving in the positive direction? What are the priorities?
I think that one of the things that we gotta make an effort to do is come together. One of the things that's probably unique to our community is that when other people from other countries come here, they somehow gravitate to building their own environments, their own communities. And if you look back to the mid-'60s when segregation was outlawed, segregation in many respects may have been one of the best things that ever happened to our community. When we desegregated, we removed all of the traditional kinds of role models from our communities. The doctors and the lawyers and the accountants all moved because they could afford to move. And all of the other folks stayed behind. But the kids didn't have the same role models. There used to be a time when the people in the shop lived next door to the teachers and the doctors and the lawyers.
We lived a few doors away from the superintendent of school in Flint, not the superintendent. The superintendent's house was at it. We used to play baseball in front of his house.
So you not only had your parents that you could use as role models, but you had other people. And that, in and of itself, was an advantage. When you lose that advantage, and you believe that it's an individual thing to develop yourself and to get there, some of us will make it, some of us won't. One of the other things that I was just thinking about is that our parents and their parents were storytellers, and they passed down your history to you. Now, parents don't tell their kids where they came from. They know little or nothing about 2 generations ago in their family. I wrote my grandson a letter yesterday to talk about how he got to be William V and the fact that his great-great-great-grandfather was a slave, how his great-great-grandfather was a sharecropper, and how every generation we made an effort to do better, so that we took steps.
Yeah.
But those conversations don't happen anymore.
They don't happen as much. I think that they need to happen, though. Maybe that's something that people need to think about.
Right.
I mean, I wrote a book to say, how we got from my great-great-great-grandmother to now. Right. And one of the main reasons I did it was because I wanted my kids to know, what the journey was.
Exactly.
But so coming together as a community. I mean, I think the thing that we assumed back in the '60s, when we were, in the street and doing the sleep-in and Flint in front of City Hall and all that kind of stuff, we assumed that integration was going to work, right? And I think one of the big disappointments to me is that with the with the fall of legalized segregation, that didn't bring on successful integration. That brought on de facto segregation that in a lot of ways was worse than the legalized segregation because white folks didn't feel safe even being in the city anymore.
And when was the last time you lived in a community where you had a block club, where you had a block club meeting? So I can tell you, I've lived in the same community now for 30 years. And many of my neighbors, I've never had a conversation with.
Yeah.
Never.
So it's not really a community.
No,
Right.
no. We just happen to live in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
But we don't have a community.
Right.
And as a result of that, I think we have allowed the lines of division to grow and grow and grow to the point where now everybody thinks they're on their own and that they don't need anybody else to make it. They don't need a support system. They don't need to have the same kind of dialogues and conversations that our parents used to have and that we used to have. It's not important to them.
Yeah. What do you think, Reg? In terms of where do we need to go from here?
First of all, I agree with all that's been said already. I believe there's a need for the community. There's a need to have aspirations to exceed those that came before you, which means you have to understand where you came from. If you're going to excel and exceed beyond them. But also, I think that you got to have just some basic morals. Respect people. Trust. You got to start building trust amongst you and others. And you got to have some real core educational things that have to be added. So, bottom line is, I hate to say this, but all the basic things that people talk about in a real community have to be strengthened. You gotta have public safety, public education, even if it's private education, but the education system has to grow. You got to have respect of and respect people.
Economic opportunity.
Economic opportunity. One of the things that separated black from the number of immigrants that have come to the United States is that these immigrants know that they are probably not going to get the same opportunities as the white people have here. Thus, they start doing the economic growth amongst themselves. So the things that happen when you desegregate it is that the blacks stop doing that amongst themselves. So they know they got to be the store owner. They know they have to be the restaurant. And many years, blacks were taught to get a good job, not to develop jobs, but to get a good job. So we go out looking for a job instead of developing an opportunity. So I think that a lot of it is while it's basic tackling and blocking, it's just not basic anymore. People have lost regard for those things. We just got to do a better job.
And the thing that I think that we really got to focus on is learning and appreciating the power of cooperative, community-based economics. You know, the fact that we're at a point where as a community, we generate $1.7 trillion in revenue every single year, yet a dollar in our community only circulates for 10 hours before it leaves. You know, that's something we can fix.
Yeah.
That can absolutely be fixed, but to do it requires a level of discipline that we aren't using.
And then also, I just want to add one other thing too. We're at a time where we got to take advantage of the technological changes that are amongst us. AI, whether we like it, dislike it, or whatever your thoughts are on it, it's a fact of life. And if we don't seize the opportunity and have AI agents working for us, they're gonna work against us.
And do our kids really understand what you accomplished and what you have to do to accomplish it? I would argue that they don't. They don't have a clue about what it took for you to get to from where you started. You know, and I think we neglect that because we don't necessarily want them to know how hard it was for us.
Well, I'm hearing something from the two of you that I'm just pulling together right now, because I think that one of the things that we can try to do as a community is to make sure that every one of these kids understands that they are an economic entity, and how can they acquire the skills to provide value and to receive compensation for that value, whether that value is provided independently or in a corporation or whatever. So I think adopting that mindset is one thing, and teaching that is one thing. And then the other thing is taking advantage of the technology that exists out there in terms of online education, AI and whatnot, to make that a reality. Put those two things together and have a real community focus on being value creators, right? And keeping as much of that value as possible in the community, right? So that the people nearest to you benefit from it. So I think that's kind of a program. It's not a program from on high. It's something that those three elements we could start focusing on.
It's simply a matter of focus. If you make the decision to do those things, and it becomes a part of your daily thought process, your daily routine, it becomes much easier. It's like anything else. If you make a decision to lose weight, you're not going to lose weight if you only focus on it one day a week.
Yeah.
It's got to be your new way of thinking, your new way of living, your new way of doing.
Yeah.
And once you make that commitment, then you've taken the first step.
Now you make me feel bad about eating that slab of ribs. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. We haven't had one for a long time. I'm glad that we recorded. I'm going to post it, Bill, and to go along with a lot of the wisdom that you put out there on Facebook and whatnot, and just to maybe we can spark more conversation like this. But I think those three elements, I think that's something we can work with.
If you can spark a conversation, brother, we can have this conversation regularly.
Yeah.
Regularly.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I'm trying to do now in my time is to make sure that as much as possible, I make a difference.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing in the world right now, is making a difference. So whatever I can do to support this effort, I'm in.
Well, I mean, we've had a set of experiences, and we've been blessed. We came through some really unique times, and I think the one thing we can do now is try to let people know. I don't like the term giving back, but we can try to teach people and let them know, what the experience was and what we think about things. So I appreciate it. I really appreciate it.